What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today, and I'm super excited to have here on the channel your boy, Alex.
Alex, thank you. Super excited to be here. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, my man. So I appreciate you for hopping on the channel too. So for those viewers, we're going to cover really the metagame that just happened in September of 2023. I think it's a good point to just stop and reflect a little bit of what happened, and then also we'll throw in some stuff that maybe we expect to see in October. But we're going to start with standard. And I know going into the metagame, a lot of us assumed that the main decks that we're going to see were like Gandiva, Wallista, some of the Stride deck sets. And that's why you can even see like Austria and a few other tournaments. Like they just have this type of distribution. So you have any thoughts right now, Alex, to just start us off?
No, yeah, just to like kind of, I guess, preface the entire video. Like this isn't just I'm going to go through each BCS. This is more like what's the overarching theme? Like what's going to go, like where do we think the meta is kind of going with that? And just any like notables from each kind of BCS, I guess, we are going to point out. So it's not just like a recap video, so to speak.
Yeah, otherwise you'll just rewatch some of the other stuff we've done before too. That's fun. Yeah, and I think like with the consistency of standard, we see multiple Wallista tops and Gandiva. Here and there's some other decks that come out, and as we can see, we have Zorga that, you know, if you're a Zorga player like myself, like I like to see more tops, but also some fan favorites. And I'm gonna show the next BCS right now, like Rosemont, for example.
Yeah, and I think MLB, honestly, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Like that for Austria being so early in the season, it kind of almost was what I still think the meta is more or less in a nutshell, barring one or two things, which we almost see two of them over here. But I think it is important to say that like the standard is kind of almost solved in a way. Like we know Gandiva is really good, consistent. Jet is still obviously what it is. Wallista, again, a consistent monster. But like I think people sleep on Messiah. People have been sleeping on MLB. And my buddy actually is the one who actually not at Rosemont, but I think in Toronto, he ended up winning with or qualifying or whatever with MLB. So there are some decks that do sneak in that are definitely worth consideration.
Yeah, MLB is a good one too. Like I was kind of alluding to, is because it got a lot of support this like the past 6 to 8 months, I think, and it got to the point where people like, wait, what does this deck do? And then it's like, wait, it can multi-attack and can do all this pressure, like 15k base, you know?
Yeah, and I think even taking a step back further from like MLB itself, it's like, I know everybody's going on about, you know, right now there needs to be a lot more defensive options in standard. So conversely, if you look on the opposite side of it, how do you exploit that in a way? And I feel like MLB is pretty much the answer to it. If you're ready to just like roll the dice, you know, triple drive on your first grade 3, have a crit on your Vanguard. Like if you just want to out Vanguard, like that's the deck to do it. So
yeah, I saw one of the deck lists recently too. Like the name of the deck list was main character plot armor. So the deck is good too. Like I think it just takes a person that is really passionate with like certain decks like these to really take it to the top tables. Yeah, which is a breath of fresh air. And on the opposite side of the spectrum, I kind of want to show this visual that later on in the Philippines, we saw what it looks like a meme, but really it's not surprising at the same time. At like top 4 Wallistas, really.
No, it's just it's super consistent. I mean, the floor of this deck is super high, so that's not. I still think that's even true to this date. Like even if we get past set 11, which is currently legal, getting even into set 12 territory, like you can still play this deck throughout the next format or two and like be absolutely fine. So I think, you know, results are what they are previously, but like going forward, I think that's a takeaway. Like the floor is super high with this deck. Like it's not hard to do well in a way.
Yeah, and when I started like doing this article series, just to like make something stand out for Wallista, a lot of the decks are very similar, so it's very hard to like they play this one for this variance, and it's really the same deck, and some people call it that the deck has been solved too at this point too. So like why would you take something else that isn't broken per se, right? If it ain't broken, you know, why fix it?
Yeah, there's like a 1-card variance you can put in it, like 1 or 2, and like I honestly think it comes down to personal preference. But
yeah, and if you're a Wallista fan, then you're in the best place to be in this meta game for sure. Exactly. And then showing some of the rest of the top 8 for the same regional, there was a 5th Wallista on top of that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But we did have a few other ones that would sneak in, such as Zorga, Hexorb, and of course Greedon too. So those are the types of decks that I would like to see more. I think moving forward with the new set being legal, set 11, but then we'll get set 12 later in October too. we're gonna see probably more Orphis with the new support. We're gonna see some of Jajul. And then also Japan, they just had a ban list where they hit like decks like Gandiva, but the question is, will we get that in the next few weeks, or we don't know?
Yeah, that's always the big question, I guess, for us over here. But even looking at just the top 8 standard thing over here, decks like Hexorb, decks like Greedon, I think they're, again, like that out Vanguard, kind of like more high roll, just like set your triggers, like exploit the weaknesses of the game design in a way. In Manhattan, or not Manhattan, White Plains in the BCS, there were multiple X2 Greedon masks. So I think that's more of like a rogue deck that we haven't been able to see in previous. I don't know if the Philippines, I don't think it was legal for that. That person might have just been playing regular Greedon, but Greedon mask, I definitely would watch out for it going forward. But Zorga, I think too, it takes a certain player, but if you can kind of get to that level with that deck, that's a deck that can carry you. Unfortunately, it's just very piece reliant. So like, sometimes it's just how the cookie crumbles, but like, again, this is more like those rogue decks that can kind of just like high roll, and the consistency kind of pieces, again, Gandiva, Ballista, Zorga, that kind of stuff are still going to just show up.
Yeah, and you pointed that out with Greedon too. The support wasn't legal actually for the new support. So
it wasn't for Philippines, right? I think this past weekend was the first one at the time of recording.
Bushiroad, for those who don't know, had this 2-week rule. So when sets come out, they're not even legal for BCS events until 2 weeks later.
Yep.
So you still have to wait.
Yeah.
Good and bad. Good because then it gives everybody a chance to get the support if they're like, I don't know, having trouble to get the stuff. Bad if you want to use your support immediately.
It also it punishes players. It doesn't punish players who haven't tested the upcoming format, because they want you to play the game. And like, if you're playing a set that's to be like, going to come out, you're obviously not going to locals and doing it. So it's like, play our game.
Yeah, I totally agree. Premium was like that for a while. Like if there was any events like for History Collection, like
it felt like a waste just playing the regular game before that.
And we'll go into the Premium once we get to that point. But I think just to wrap up Standard is that, if you prepped for Gandiva, Ballista, and the Stride deck sets, you were in a good place if you played them, or if you knew the matchup going against them. And then we saw little bits. I think the surprise one was MLB for the most part. It got multiple tops through multiple events. And
I do want to shout out to I don't know if you have the visual for White Plains, but again, there was another MLB, but there was a Shoujo Doji. There also was Minerva in the top 8. I think Kay, my buddy who was playing Minerva, he would have gone farther. It's just defensive OT on a turn. He set up like 8 multi-attacks. That's another deck where everything is now legal. I think it's been that way for a little bit, but that's a deck that doesn't have as many tops, but is still an extremely potent deck. It's like, in the right hands, definitely still a tier 1 deck. So I guess that's the only other like meta call I want to kind of shout out here. Yeah, we do have it. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah. And and Ava too. I saw Ava at the Legacy Cup 2 weeks ago. Came in second, and then it's coming up here too. Came in second place, I think, in this one. So it's honestly still a good deck. There's a lot of choices that you can bring to the table. Just because you don't see it on this chart doesn't mean it's not good. That's
right. Some people were like X2s. Sometimes they don't make it with the tiebreakers too. It's unfortunate, and you really don't know that unless you were at the event too. Which is there any other shout outs or things you want to do for Standard before we move on to V Premium, Alex?
No, I think that's pretty much it for Standard. I think we kind of covered all the top decks, and just like my thoughts going forward. Again, Orphis is going to come back up in the meta a little bit. Tamiyura, I think, is a dark horse. Minerva's still really solid, underrepresented, but there's a lot more variance that I think people are so convinced, they know the top 3 decks, and like to a large extent could be true. But as you can see, there's multiple rogue decks that kind of pop in, and like there's way more viability in the format than I think these tops are really representing.
No, absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into V Premium next, and I just pull up Toronto. So Toronto was the first BCS as well. In this case, like V Premium banned in Toronto by this point.
Yep.
So there was no top 4 just Team Maidens.
Yeah.
Kind of dilemma. And V Premium, I think, is in a much better place. It's also more diverse too. And it instantly basically showed on the first BCS, which I'm really happy about, because there's a lot of different decks that people can explore, but also like as a player, like you get to have more fun also in preparation for the different matchups too.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to point out? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just not even talking about, this one specifically, but just V in general. I know a lot of people like to harp on the fact that diversity doesn't mean health necessarily. And yes, that I agree with that statement largely, but it is always nice to see a diverse kind of set of decks. In my opinion, it's just what I personally like. And also, I want to kind of just reference another game really quick, just to kind of bring some light to this, because everybody talks about this being stale, which to an extent, we haven't had a set in, however many months. I don't even know, like a year at this point. Sure. Yeah, something like that. So in a way, yes, new support has been stale, but when you look at a game I know it's a weird comparison, but Battle Spirits, it came out with the first set, and I think that lasted for maybe 4 months. Within that 4 months, there were, they had a bunch of regional things like that, and the meta basically shifted 4 times with one single set. So it's you can have changes just based on what people are playing. You can then try to counter that and so on and so forth. So yes, our card pool is still stayed the same, but I don't want to necessarily say the meta stayed the same. And I think Toronto right off the bat is a great example of this. We just see so many different decks coming to the plate, coming to play, and really being able to perform at that level is something big.
Yeah, I agree. That's another thing that sometimes people forget, what's actually played the most in a region. Some regions have fan favorites, or maybe just some commonalities with types of players too. Vanguard may not be the best game to show that, but from other games, there might be more aggressive types of players. There might be more control-based players. There might be more resourceful types of decks. It shows more in different games probably.
Yeah, I think even in Vanguard, I have my preconceived notions. I was Midwest is Narukami. All of a sudden, I see 5 Narukami come up in premium, for example, and so on and so forth. But
I would say this: I've seen Narukami for the past 6-7 years.
So I definitely have my notions, sure. But maybe not as the number one or premium example you could use. But I think people have ideas.
Yeah, it's really cool just seeing more diversity. And let me see if I can bring up a different BCS. And I think this might be a good example where some of the fan favorites can change a little bit. So in this one, we have 4 Shadow Paladin, and they're all Luward.
I mean, looking even just back at the last slide that we did look at, everything in there, in my opinion, was correct. You can go and use any of those decks and expect a top, and then none of these decks translated into that top 8. But I could say the same thing. You can play any of these decks, even Hamskay. Hamskay is definitely again, another dark horse, kind of rogue pick. Fenrir is the Swiss Army knife of V premium at this point. You can seriously expect to have good results and play with these decks. So
no, I agree, especially if you set it up right with Night Rose, a big 60k plus Skull Dragon.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
3 or 4 of them to the face. It does the damage,
Yep, exactly.
And then Luar does what it does best. It multi-attack with crit, force markers, and deck denning on top of that.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's still, there's still just so many good decks in V. So the format hasn't changed, but I guess I just want to say my 2 cents and be I hope the format isn't just axed next year and whatnot. I hope they actually do kind of appreciate and kind of give it, a little more thought and love upcoming.
No, I agree. Yeah, and we can see other BCS events like Puerto Rico. It comes back to almost a little more diversity. But Luard's still in there, and then you got Thava, Skrgoet showing again.
Yeah, no, these are all super viable decks. There's not a deck here that I'm pointing at and be why would anybody take this? So
right, and then I think I'll cover one more before we change gears. Let me share right here. And then here we go. I think you can see that. Yeah. So we have White Plains that just happened recently as well. 3 Aquaforce. I was wow. It really
they were. I played Aquaforce too. I'm cursed with that deck. I shouldn't have done it, but it's okay. I could have built a house with all the bricks I had, but big shout out to my buddy Michael. He got second. He qualified for Worlds over here. Anybody else I know in the top 8? Budget Building Network actually got in the top 8 with Fenrir too. That was really cool to see. I don't think I knew anybody else who was in this one, but this was, again, all day I ran into meta picks, but I also ran into really funny stuff too. So I think people at the top are still, playing the decks that are generally accepted as being good, which any one of these decks up here definitely could be. But people are also playing some of their pet decks, trying to keep people like off balance just with the rogue stuff that they're not used to running into. And I think I saw a lot of people in like very odd predicaments all day, and like it was actually interesting to see. Like the format's not as stale, I think, as a lot of people have claimed it is.
Yeah, and here's what's really cool. I think some people think there's always like a top 3, top 5, but I see them as like, what are the top contenders? Like decks that can actually top and compete, and there's a lot of choices, so even people can play more of their favorites.
Yep.
In most cases too.
Yeah.
So especially for the Thavas players, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I think with the Ride Fixer, the meta slightly shifts around a little bit.
Yes.
I think Night Rose actually is going to be a little bit better once granblue gets theirs. Definitely one of the best decks, but we saw it with Thavas. I think that's what really kind of took it and like threw it over the edge. And people are kind of recognizing that. I know Solomon posted his deck list. My buddy Ray over in I think he's in Lithuania or Latvia. I forgot off the top of my head which one, but he qualified. He got first over in oh god, I forgot where it was. Vienna. I think it was Vienna. So he was using Thavas. So I think a lot of these top players are realizing how good the deck really is at this point. And
the V promos just add a lot of consistency to a lot of decks. That really
which the format needed. 100%.
Yeah, that too. Because like we don't have a right lane in V Premium, so
nope. Yeah, it's tougher.
And I think moving forward for October, I mean, I think for the most part there's still going to be some diversity. There's no new cards introduced in V planned, to my knowledge. And who knows for the rest of the BCS season, actually. So it comes down to really like the region specific players at this point, and I'm just excited to see what else pops up. I'm curious. I
think as diverse as the format is, it's kind of settled that these the past 10-12 decks that we saw, like if you're really serious about playing, like those are probably the ones you want to go with. But like again, 10 to 12 choices, and to like seriously enter with like a good an expectation of actually topping and possibly winning it all is definitely solid in my opinion. So
totally agree. Yeah. So let's just switch to premium.
Save the best for last, huh?
Oh yes. And so started off with Toronto. So to preface this, history collection in a BCS level event in the English regions was legal, and so this whole new metagame was shaping up for them. So the first couple of events really just getting their feet wet in the water kind of thing. But there were decks that I think most of us would expect to have topped, and we can see actually 2 or 3 of them depending on your perspective. We saw Mega Colony because they got the GB2 skill from Darkface as well. Chaos Breaker because it can give a gift forcefully, which means that any history collection Errata Stride is useless at that point. Which a lot of decks were catered to. And then we also see like Dimension Police, which they all show some representation. Any other thoughts on that, Alex?
I can kind of give just like before we even hop into results, just like my perspective and a lot of like my testing mates and stuff. But over the past couple months, we've heard a lot of people talk about Ghidorah not being a good deck, Chaos not being a good deck, like prominent people in the community kind of saying it. And all of a sudden you see it pop up, you see it doing well. Highlander too, to the same extent. I think it's very much rock, paper, scissors right now, this format. Largely, a lot of people to blanket themselves are taking control. I was also one of them. I took Ghidorah. I've been playing Ghidorah for like a year and a half, even when it was quote unquote bad. But once you do that, you have 2 other options. You could either aggro out. It's very like matchup dependent, but like Ghidorah crashing into Narukami's favor, Ghidorah into Pale Moon or any other thing, so on and so forth. Like it's very rock paper scissors in general. So you have to go in with the mindset: am I going to play control? Am I going to play something that is aggressive, or am I going to just try to rogue it out in general? And like this is starting. I think the later we see better examples of what the true meta is right now, but people adopted the whole control aspect here. Roguing out with just like Katrina and what is it? DP I think is a safer Dark Horse rogue pick, but also just like the aggressive Messiah, like striding up, getting those 5-6 attacks or whatever it is immediately is just showing that aggression. So you're kind of picking your flavor and then choosing a deck from there. And I think as we go through these results, you'll kind of see more or less that mindset is kind of applied to all the top 8s.
Yeah, and just to sprinkle a little bit of what you said, decks like Messiah and Gear Chronicle also had the crest in their builds too. So this is actually using the crest as well for Messiah.
Super interesting.
Interestingly, because we're in a multi-attack format even more so, especially if you're playing an Excel deck, because you get 2 Excel circles right off the back, there was more Hanalies versus having Rolocks. So DP was like, oh, you don't have Rolock anymore, or you have less of it. All right, I'm going to be lethal as soon as I ride up.
Yeah, exactly.
So like these little factors, and all of a sudden, like you said, it just depends on when they end up like facing, really. But it's a good point to point out. So moving into Austria, and so again, the format is kind of like trying to figure out itself. I was surprised to see Angel Feather Gize, for example. And it wasn't even using like the errata stuff. It was actually V Series Gabrielle.
Yeah, no. This is just one of the best decks to do the Gize theme. I've never played the deck up until this weekend. Shouts out to Evan from Team Legacy. He played it. We practiced on day 1 right before Premium, and I had no idea what the deck did. I ran into it day 2, almost got him, but made one little silly mistake. I could have Ghidora'd him, but I just, bad player is bad. But I haven't seen it, and all of a sudden it's popping up. So I think it's actually like a legitimate deck. I think it's very consistent. So overall, though, I wouldn't hang my hat on the Austria results as much. I think this was still a little bit early in the season.
Yes.
Narukami solid, Night Rose still solid. Like all these things are still solid. I'm not saying any of them are bad decks, but like, I don't know that this is like what I'd point to be like, yeah, this is definitely the meta.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a funnier result. Oh.
Shameless plug over here. Go check out Fuzzy's website.
Right, check out Fuzzy. Actually, this is from Fuzzy. Actually.
Yeah, no, everything. Yeah,
so thanks to him awesome for doing all this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this video in the first place. Exactly. So I appreciate him. But Rosemont. So this one was the one I was at, and I was playing Premium. And so top 8 was interesting because there was 5 Narukami decks. Yeah. Now we're starting to see where like it was control, and to a degree you could see Narukami be control based, but it is aggressive as well because it can multi attack. And if you guys don't know, it can do the GB4 play going second, which means that you do stun verse first, and then you're back to grade 3, and then you do Zoras, and now you're GB4, but then you have like the benefits of stun verse and then double Excel circle from Zoras. It's ridiculous with binding on top of that.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, the deck is more or less solved too. I think Ty and Michael, Team Best Girl, like they're
both made it on top 8. Yep.
Yeah, they were like 1 or 2 cards off, but like more or less, I think everybody knows what it is. And like again, I'm not going to point to this and be like, yeah, this is definitely the meta, but like Narukami's again one of those blanket decks where like if you're not sure what to play, if you want something that's like fairly good, has a good matchup into like a lot of different things, this is definitely a safe pick to play. Yep. And okay, still just like high roll. You could do what you do. You could be the best deck in the room or the worst. Gear Chronicle is still amazing. I think it's actually still slept on. And then OTT is definitely rogue. I played against a couple OTT players, and if they catch you off guard, it's like insane.
And I guess shed a little more light. And it's funny what you said about NLK. You said it's like you win big or go home, and it won big because they won first.
It won. Yeah, it won the whole thing.
So shout out to them. They're from the Las Vegas crew, and as well OTT. Darren, nice. I actually just interviewed him. And I even asked him too, because he said in his preparation he played all the 24 clans from History Collection just to see. Oh, wow. And I'm like, why did you pick OTT? And he really came down to like, the deck list that he came to be, and essentially he puts you in a spot where you can't just guard anything with hand, and he can be lethal from 2 damage and one-shot you to 6, which is crazy. It happened to me.
Yeah, no, it does. It's like insane. That deck is actually kind of crazy right now.
Yeah, so I think though, like that deck is more catered to the person that really is passionate for OTT. I don't think it's like a deck that anybody can just pick it up unless like they played OTT before at that point. And like, it's funny you say that because like I know, so we have like 1 or 2 people in our testing group who are like OTT main, like these kids, their brain is like, I don't know how it fits in their skull. It's that big, kind of big. And I'm talking about you, Barry, if you're watching. But essentially because of them, other people are like, oh, let me try this. And they do not have the same results. Like you have to be into the deck. You have to like definitely like know your way around it. And it's not just a deck you pick up, which I mean, I think that people need to take a little bit more, or they need to value this a little bit more in general. Just like play what you want to play, and like you will be good. Like if you're a good player, you're going to be good no matter what. So don't just like flock to the best deck that you think is, then you're going to perform like, very middling or whatever. Like play what you want to play in a way. Yeah, and I would say that to players too. Like, if you're very confident in the deck and you have a really solid build, you can lean more on your skill level within that deck or that clan per se. and that'll get you very, very far. And in some people, like the Clay player, I'm sure it's one of his favorites, and he got it all at this point.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And lastly, to wrap up with Murakami, is that I would just say, like, not only it's a solid deck to pick, but it's also a good matchup to practice too. So if you're thinking in the next couple months for like BCS, I think it's a good choice to like be prepared against Murakami at this point.
Yeah,
it's been around for years too.
100%. No, it's like super solid. It's like one of those decks that I think the game developers play, so therefore it's always going to be solid. So.
Yeah, and as I was going through the rounds, a lot of the X2s too, there were some Mega Colony players, there were some Nubatama players that were all in the X2s essentially, and some of them got to face each other, so some of them ended up as X3s.
yeah.
But it just shows that
there's a lot more variety beyond these lists. I think for sure.
Yeah, which Puerto Rico is interesting. I think it's a little bit of a smaller BCS, but it does open more of the diversity factor. And I think we can see like finally Nubatama showing some representation. You got Nova Grapplers, Raging Form. So if you're a fan favorite, Raging Form, I was like, sweet, you know.
Yeah, I saw these floating around at White Plains too, and honestly, like, you know, Vanguard is Vanguard. Check some yellows, like you can win the game. Check even more yellows, like you have a higher shot. Like I get it, and I feel like a lot of this, I mean, almost all of this top 8 is like aggro, outside of maybe Nubatama. So I think that might be more so the mindset. So it kind of plays into that whole like regional, you know what the region might play and like kind of anticipate that. So.
I would totally agree.
Interesting.
Yeah, Raging Form is funny because it's like you got History Collection where you have all these strides. Oh, I get 2 force gifts. I mean, Raging Form already does that though. Going first, it just does it a little bit differently. Let's see, and then we got Manila or Philippines as well. A little more diversity. So this is the first instance of the mill type of decks that actually topped. So there is Melista. But there's also like the grade 4 variant with the Pop Star. So that's the one that's actually at the bottom right. So
that one's a mill deck?
That is a mill deck. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it has a lot of the Mortoa parts and stuff, but not everything. It plays it a little bit differently. And it could also play normal Bermuda Triangle things, right?
Gotcha.
Because from what I've realized about this deck is that it's really your turn 4 that you can do the loop. So you need to survive at that point too.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to like point that out because I know this deck was kind of like just like it needs to be addressed. It's just one of those infinite loops that people just don't want to deal with. They don't want to be on the receiving end of an infinite loop.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
People too say like, oh, it doesn't have tops, but like. That's not really the point of it. Right. If it is something that can be exploited, for example, like Alec Utman, he got 4th with it in BCS. Like he already had his invite. He just brought it for like a complete meme, and like he just on a whim picked it up again and like played it. And if you're a good enough player, you're definitely going to be able to get that exploit off. And like just playing solitaire and winning, and irregardless of your opponent's input, is not how Vanguard fundamentally, in my opinion, should be played. So like even if it doesn't have the tops, like. It's still a problem deck in and of itself. So that's kind of what I'm getting.
Nobody wants to be in the receiving end.
No, it just feels bad. It's like you have no interaction. Like that's not the nature of Vanguard.
Yeah, some people were like, as long as you could prove through the loop, that's it, I'm done. And it's just like that's not really fun at all. But I guess we'll switch to White Plains at this point and just wrap up for today, too. So there's a good amount of diversity here, too, and we still see some control decks, too. And then, of course, the Melissa deck as well, like you mentioned. Anything else you want to shout out since you were actually in this, or point out, I should say, in this event?
Again, congrats to Alec Utman for the 4th place there. Congrats to my buddy Eric, one of the Highlander players. Top 8, one of the guy who got me to the game pretty much. Jake, also Demios on Twitter. He is also... I think he got 3rd with he got 2nd with Chaos over here. And I mean, top 8 was like super serious. Everybody was really good. I think honestly, if I was to like pick one premium BCS and look at it and be like, this is a good snapshot of the meta, like this is exactly it. Like Highlander is still like insane. People I think were undervaluing it for a long time. Chaos, again, it's like pretty much the premier control deck. If you're a good enough player, you will know how to lock and keep your opponent from playing the game. Ghidorah is always going to do Ghidorah things.
Yep.
Really nice guy playing that, by the way. My buddy Kay, also top 8. He was the one playing Narukami. He, again, got shut off by a defensive OT. I think he might have got it otherwise, but he's cursed in top 8. He's like topped everything, but just can't get that invite right now. But he will. His time's coming. This is really what I would look at and be like, yes, this is like a great snapshot of the meta. Not just trying to say that because it's New York, but I feel like we're at a point right now where it's like settling down a little bit and like,
yeah, I would agree.
That's kind of, at least my opinion. So you could definitely still play rogue stuff. Like there's a ton of other decks that you can viably play. Like we just saw in Manila, Pale Moon, like all these crazy different things.
Yes,
you could still do well. So don't let that discourage you. But this is probably the most like vanilla meta kind of top 8 that I've seen.
I see like the snapshot, like what you would expect, and then everybody else can decide to play whatever they want to play.
Yeah.
I got
if I was preparing, these are the matchups I would like anticipate in the room. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess wrapping up with thinking about like maybe October, I mean, there's not really new support technically coming out for premium, but there is like overdress support that will come out. And so that always play a factor too. Oh, go ahead.
One thing for premium, actually, I don't know if it's October. I forget when, but when granblue does get that grade 2 promo, the ride fixer, I think that deck it's already at a high tier. It just can get shut off so bad from these control decks, but like I think more people are going to maybe try to do it. Like it's a really, really solid deck. I don't know if that's going to be October, but looking forward to the future, I feel like that's the one change I would kind of say might start inserting itself into this a little bit more.
Yeah, it's perfect too. It's the spooky season.
Yeah.
Halloween.
Exactly.
Yeah, if I were to pick as my second pick, it would have been Night Rose actually too. It's a very solid deck too. I would agree with that. Yeah. And then I think once we hit for English, I think that January, but at that point I think BCS is over. They're getting the Stride deck sets for standard for Shiranui and Luard as well. So I don't know if that has some impact for premium. Just like the Chronojet one and then also like the Messiah one. Obviously the Crest is going to be experimented if they keep it that way. I don't know. They haven't really revealed much from those deck sets, so there's no guessing at that point. So we'll wrap up, and that's it for today. So thanks again, Alex. I appreciate your input and also your feedback about this. It's always good to chat with other YouTuber content creators and do collabs like this too.
Absolutely. Anytime. Got to get you on my channel.
Absolutely. Happy to do whatever you want. Happy to help out. And so anything you want to say before we head out? No, again, just appreciate it. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video, possibly consider subscribing to the channel. Your captain's over here trying to give you all the best content. And entertains me day in, day out. I always watch his videos, so you guys should too. I appreciate that, brother. And same thing with Alex. Go check out his content too. Very good guy, very consistent too. A lot of different types of decks too. So give him some love as well. So thank you. Without further ado, yeah, you're welcome. Without further ado, until next time, amigos. Bye.